Hello, 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 and welcome back to DLA Alternative. It's your boy Brandon, and I hope everyone is doing phenomenal as always. And thank you to everyone who keeps killing it on the last theory. We are almost at 3.4 thousand views in just the past 3 or 4 days, people. Views like this for a channel that's growing like ours is amazing to me. I've been watching YouTube for years since this app and website has started, so trust me, I know how this stuff works, people. Views like this and the following that you guys are giving me is truly amazing to me. So thank you, and keep subscribing, liking, and following this journey with us. But yes, more importantly, you guys chose it through our poll. I gave you a few options on the next genre, okay, of this theory, and you guys chose a character theory, all right? And trust me, there was a lot of good choices, and we're going to cover those characters. I have a list, like I said in one of the last posts, all right? And if you have not been checking out the new post, the poll post, all right, I'm making a random list that I'm going to announce right before this Stranger Things season comes out, okay? Basically, this list is going to be a list of random topics, all right? And it's going to get a little goofy as we go along. And I'm going to try and think of a topic every single day with a poll with 4 people to choose from, all right? And we're going to make this list by Stranger Things the premiere, all right? But if you have not seen those polls, okay, the first topic, all right, was who's most likely to be a goner, and it was guys edition, and we had the choices between Steve, Dustin, Murray, and Jonathan. And I was a little bit surprised that people were pretty much off the Steve train, all right? That's kind of why I just threw him in here, because I want this to be random characters. I don't want this to be the common characters that we're all hearing. I want to see people's thoughts about other people. But basically, with your guys' choice, with a whopping 58 or 59%, Murray won. Okay, so people think that Murray might be a goner in season 5. So let me know your thoughts about that in the comments. But if you have not seen our second poll, it is still up until I think like maybe about 4 o'clock. I don't know if they run for 24 hours or if they keep running. But if you have a chance to vote on all of them, just keep voting because it's going to get interesting. I'm going to make this list by, like I said, by the premiere. But I want to know your topics as well. So think of some goofy topics, just random things that we could add to the list, all right? Kind of think of it like a yearbook, all right? Like what you see at the end of a senior high school yearbook. But it's going to get a little goofy, like I said, but go check those out. And the second poll is still up, and it's who's most likely to be a goner girls edition. And we have the choices between Nancy, Robin, Joyce, and Karen, all right? And Karen, I think, is leading right now. I have not checked by the filming of this right now. But with all those little announcements being said, let's get right into this one, people, because you guys chose it a character theory, and I chose from the few characters you put in those comments, and we are going to get into a big topic and a big character, people, and I have a lot of thoughts about this man, all right? We are about to jump into the Dr. Owens theory part 1. And yes, I say part 1 in all of these theories, people. We can continue these theories if you really want to jump back into some of these theories we have not connected to, all right? We are definitely going to jump back into the Karen Wheeler theory. I am working on a Eddie Munson theory part 2. I want to do a Steve Harrington theory. I want to do a Sarah Hopper theory. We have a lot of theories we can cover, people, so let me know your thoughts. But yes, let's just jump right into this one. So I want everybody to keep in mind, all right, there's something I need you to keep in mind during this one, all right, that I have some weird thoughts about Owens, all right? I've had some weird thoughts about Owens' involvement in Hawkins' lab and in this show this entire time. So what we're going to do here is we're going to analyze the very first time we ever meet Owens, because there's a lot of tells here, people, and there's a lot of suspicious things, and I think I have an idea of why this is going on. So let's jump right into this one, and I hope you people are ready because it's going to get interesting. So this conversation starts off, like I said, and we're going to jump right to when we meet Owens, all right? So Will is in that hospital room. They're doing all these things. They're getting him ready for this exam, all right? So they take his blood, they put these brain scanners on, and they're measuring the level of his brain on that machine. And right away, if you see this machine, okay, what does this machine like? We get flashes of this machine through this whole scene, okay, because it's showing his scan. But I'm going to connect something to season 4 right now, people, because this machine may or may not be the same exact machine that we see in season 4 right at the beginning, people. Literally right at the beginning, people, right when we see our boy number 10 at the start of season 4 go get his exam. He's going into that room with Brenner, and we see everything go down, how that season starts, people. And what machine are they using, people? They are using that 1511 machine, okay, that brain scanner machine. And yes, the obvious thing is that these are just the types of machines that they are using in Hawkins' lab, but still, is it not a little odd that we see this all the way back in season 2, and then all of a sudden our season 4 starts, and we know how that season has entailed. We get our new character of Vecna, and we get this new major connection to a big problem that has been there the entire time. But with all that being said, okay, Owens walks in after Will is ready to go, and Owens walks in, and the very first thing he says is a very big hint, in my opinion, and you might not catch on to it, but he says, "Sir Will, how are you doing today?" And with our best friend Google, you could search up just who is Sir Will, and is it associated with anything to do with this scene right here? And Sir Will, okay, is a person from like the 1800s, early 1900s, and this man is known as one of the fathers of modern medicine, okay? So just think about that phrase, people, the father of modern medicine, just the term the father, and then we see of modern medicine. So we got a doctor walking in, but the term the father of modern medicine is very interesting. So let me know your thoughts so far about that. Because as Owen walks in again, okay, we get another father reference because he says hello to Joyce. He says, "Hello, Mom." And then he looks at Hopper and he goes, "And Pop?" And then all of a sudden we get this little stare from Hopper and he's like, "What are you talking about, bro? I'm not Pops, all right?" But like I said, is it not weird that we just get this Sir Will reference, which is kind of a hidden reference to the father of modern medicine, but then all of a sudden they jump this obvious hint in, and he calls Hopper Pops for some reason. And you got to remember, people, this is season 2. This is well before Hopper and Joyce are ever together, all right? And we know that Hopper knows Owen secretly, and we don't know a lot about that, all right? But we do know that they have this secret deal or some secret involvement together, all right? So just keep that in mind. It's very interesting that he uses this reference involving Hopper. So let me know your thoughts. But as Owen sits down, all right, he kind of just sits down and he starts talking to Will, and he's trying to ease him into this appointment, all right, trying to make him feel comfortable. And he mentions his weight, okay? And he mentions that he's lost a pound since the last time they saw him. And how Owens handled this, all right? He handles this like it's nonchalant, like it's no big deal, all right? But as we know what's going on with Will so far, all right, we know this boy is having terrifying visions, all right, into the upside down for some reason. And the doctors obviously know this, okay, because he's going to these appointments to get checked out for this. How Owens just nonchalantly tries to make everything feel comfortable during this scenario, right? He also acts like he's kind of just reading a script, and that's a big hint I'm going to give you to this. I want everybody to pay close attention to Owens during this conversation, everything he looks like and how he approaches everything he asks. How Owens acts during this conversation is kind of like he expects and knows where to go with this, and he's trying to get the answers for Will to say what he wants him to say. Because as he mentions that he's only lost a pound, and I know that's not a lot, all right, but he mentions that he's lost a pound since they last saw him. But if you think about this, all right, the fact that Will is losing weight because of this, that in modern medicine, okay, is not a good sign. If some kid this age is stressed out to the point that he is losing weight, and like I said, I know it's a pound, that's not a lot. But this is a child, people, and children should not be losing weight like this, okay? Children are developing and children need to grow, all right? They eat a lot and all this, so they should be gaining weight naturally. And no, I'm not a parent, but I know we have a lot of parents down in the comments, so I'm sure you guys could defend this, that your children probably eat a bunch and that they normally are not losing weight. And your children probably are not stressed out to the point that they are seeing flashes into the upside down. So that's probably why Will is losing weight from stress, all right? But like I said, Owen just shrugs it off and kind of just makes a joke. He's like, oh, trying to make room for all that Halloween candy because Halloween is the next day, okay? Or in 2 days or whatever. So basically you just ask him, he's like, what's your favorite candy? Life or death situation? And Will kind of just doesn't know how to answer. He's uncomfortable, all right? And he looks at his mom, and then all of a sudden he says Reese's Pieces. And that, in my opinion, and it's probably very obvious to you all, that this is a very big homage and reference to our movie of E.T., okay? And what do we have a connection to in E.T.? I've never talked about E.T. in these theories at all, I don't think. But we have a huge connection to E.T. in this show, and it's a little backwards, all right? It's a little upside down in our show of Stranger Things versus E.T. But if we think about this connection, all right, and we think about this term right here, okay, the term of the Reese's Pieces in E.T., all right, in E.T., if you've ever seen it, okay, when Elliot comes across E.T. for the first time, he comes across E.T. in his shed, okay, kind of like the opposite in this show when we see Will for the first time and he's running away from something that's chasing him and he runs into his shed. And then all of a sudden, our boy just vanishes and disappears. But what do we get in this show, people? We do get somebody or a character that does reappear, all right? And that, in my opinion, people, is our girl 11, because we see our boy Will vanish, but we do get a creature or a character. I don't want to call her a creature a monster, because she is not a monster. But we do get somebody that is new and a new character into this whole scenario that ends up entailing in the show. So for thinking about this, that's just a little weird connection if you ask me. Let me know your thoughts, but it's a little weird that we have kind of a boy that resembles Elliot being Will. But then we get a new character, all right? We get in E.T., we get literally E.T., this extraterrestrial character that has these powers or this connection, okay, that wants to connect to home. But then we get our amazing new character in our show of Stranger Things being 11, being Jane, being Elle, okay? So let me know your thoughts about all this. I just thought it was cool, and that's kind of a cool reference and connection, but those two scenes and the connection to this show is very interesting. But as Owens continues and he kind of makes Will feel comfortable, this scene takes a little bit of a turn and gets very interesting, and this is what I mean by Owens is involved with something more than what we were seeing Brenner and all of those scientists involved with. What Owens is doing here is he is being observed by people, okay? And as we see this continue, it backs out and we see this room with all these screens, which we see later in this show, okay? And we'll talk about that in another part of this theory. But what we see is this back up and we see a group of men just observing and listening to what is going on. So we have a lot of people in this room just watching this, all right? But if you ask me, what we see here is it kind of looks like this is somewhat of military men / scientists or whatever just watching this, okay? They are observing. So what does that mean for Owen's involvement here, all right? Because we know later in season 4, there's another season 4 connection with Owen, specifically when he comes back as a major character. We see that we have this new doctor and that he has no connection to this season 1, all right? But then all of a sudden in season 2, we have this new man and this new man in charge of all of Hawkins' lab. And then we see this real quickly that he has involvement with something secret that's going on. So I'm going to ask you is, do you think Owens is secretly there, all right? Secretly involved with what's going on in Hawkins' lab? And what I mean by that is that, yes, maybe he is partially a doctor, all right? But do you guys think that Owens has a deeper meaning of why he is there, okay? And no, I do not mean that he is there to be a doctor, okay? But maybe just to observe the doctors in secret. Because later in this season, people, I'm just going to hint at it right now, all right, that we have a big major episode in this show as a whole, all right? The episode being called The Spy. And in this show, we obviously know it's associated with Will and Vecna and all of these things, okay? But it's not ever associated with an actual human being and someone who doesn't have these problems or these issues. But if you think about it, people, the fact that we just got this random new doctor, but we do see later that he is involved with Brenner, okay? Do you think Owens is like a secret agent or a spy involved with this whole scenario, okay? And not directly with Hawkins' lab, but maybe a spy for the government or the CIA or something that is trying to be undercover or a secret agent to figure out what's going on in Hawkins' lab. And yes, like we see that he is involved with Brenner and that he's had involvement with Brenner. I even mean back then. That Brenner truly might not know, all right, that Owens might be a spy or a secret agent working against him or working to try and figure out the bigger picture of all of this and actually to help all of this, unlike we see kind of from Brenner that he's kind of just crazy and determined to figure out the things that are causing these problems. But if we think about this, people, I'm going to just hint at this. We'll talk about this in later theories, but we do kind of get a hint of this in season 4, if you ask me. It's right when Owens kind of turns on Brenner, all right? And he's allowing 11 to leave the Nina Project. And he kind of goes against him. He's like, we are not going to hold her against her will. We said that we would let her leave. And then what do we see, people? We see Brenner take a turn and he traps 11, and then all of a sudden we also see him take a turn on Owens. And what do we see, people? We see them trap him in this room and handcuff him and beat him up, all right? Because when the military men who he knows, all right, and who he talked to before this Nina project where he was keeping this secret, sometimes when spies get involved too far or too deeply into stuff, people, and there's a lot of movies that this happens in, a lot of other movies, all right? But if you think about this, people, sometimes spies get a little too deep with what's going on, all right? So if Owens is involved with the military or the CIA, all right, secretly, and that's why he is there, okay? Maybe that's why we see in season 4 with Owens' involvement that the military even kind of goes against him, because maybe that's why Owens was there to begin with, is to give them information about Eleven or Jane. But as Owens develops this, people, he might have known that something is very, very wrong and not going as planned. And that's how we're going to continue this conversation. So just keep in mind that Owens might know a little bit more about what is supposed to be happening, because how he acts is a little odd. He kind of acts like he knows what should be answered from Will with these questions we're going to get into, but he also kind of acts like he knows how to handle the situation with Joyce and Hopper later. So let's just continue. I had to put those connections in there, but let me know your thoughts. It's very interesting if you ask me, and I needed to hint at that. So let me know your thoughts, people. Because as we see these men in this room and as Owens is talking, Will starts talking. He goes, I don't know. My friends were just there, and then all of a sudden they were gone, and then I was back there. And we hear Owens say, back where? The Upside Down? So this, in my opinion, is proof that in past appointments and things that we do not know about, okay, which I really hope we see some of this in season 5. What I mean by that, I mean the appointments that we have not seen, the flashes that Will was getting, or these episodes that Will had before this season started, all right? So in between season 1 and season 2. There obviously is a lot that has been happening with Will's all the way since season 1. So it's very interesting, and there's a lot of connections to this in this show. So like I said, we'll talk about it in later theories. But with how Owens answers, he basically says, the Upside Down. We do know that the scientists and all of these scientists have been going into the Upside Down. We get hints of this later in this season, that they're going in on their own and they're doing stuff in the Upside Down. So logically, people, you got to think about this, and it's a little bit of cheating, but now that we know what happens in this show, we wouldn't have known this early on in this conversation, but we do now. And the reason being is because we know later that the scientists are going into the Upside Down, so they obviously should know what is happening in the Upside Down. So is that why they are observing Will so deeply and asking questions that they should just be getting the correct answers to? Because that's kind of how this conversation goes. All of a sudden, Will says, I heard a noise, and then it got louder, and it was outside. So it was kind of luring him out there, all right? And then all of a sudden, he says when he got outside, it got worse. And these are the times that you need to pay attention to how Owens looks, okay? How he acts in this scene. Even the actor himself, how he is acting and portraying this character right now. How he answers this, he's answering confidently, and he's just kind of answering like he's reading off a script in a way. Because he answers confidently, and he answers to try and get Will to say what they want him to say, all right? And he goes, well, how was it worse? And then all of a sudden, Will says there was a storm, okay? And how Owens answers, he answers real quickly. And if you think about this, people, the scientists should know logically that there is a storm going on in the Upside Down right now, because we see them go in there. And we see them go in there later with Owens, because that guy goes in there to change that battery that's fried, all right? And we'll talk about that later in the later theory, all right? But like I said, Owens answers real quickly, and he just all of a sudden he goes, well, how did this storm make you feel? Because then Will answers, and it might not have been the answer that they were exactly hoping for, all right? Because how Owens asks his next question. Will basically answers, and he says, it made me feel frozen. And then all of a sudden, Owens asks a weird question that does not really resemble somebody feeling frozen, all right? Because Owens asks, he goes frozen, like heart racing, and he answers confidently. But if you ask me, if I was frozen, okay, hey, with how Will ends up explaining this, or even just explaining to somebody that I feel frozen for what I'm seeing in front of me, I would not think that to ask the question, oh, well, your heart was racing, right? Like, in my opinion, that is not the exact question I would be asking, okay? So that's why I kind of saying, like, maybe Owens is reading off a script or asking questions that he's supposed to just trying to be getting answers from Will. So think of it like he's trying to ask these questions and lead Will to give them these correct answers or the things that they are expecting him to say. Because Will says, he goes, no, just frozen. He's not giving him more, all right? He's not giving him what Owens wants. He answers the same exact way. He goes, no, just frozen. He says the same thing. So then Owens, in my opinion, this is where he improvises. This is the improvisation, people. I didn't say that right, but whatever. This is kind of where Owens thinks of something to get the conversation going where he wants it to go, all right? Because he goes frozen, like cold or to the touch. Like I said, he might have been wrong in this way, but he does get an answer that I think he wanted to hear. Because all of a sudden, Will goes, he goes, no, like when you're scared, you can't breathe, you can't move, you can't do anything. And I believe they show a little flash of Owens, and he kind of looks confident, like this is the answer he wanted. But this is where I think he kind of went wrong, okay, with when he says frozen cold or frozen to the touch. Because all of a sudden, Will keeps going. He doesn't stop and just stop there, all right? He keeps saying, he goes, I felt this evil, and it was looking at me, all right? So logically, people, storms don't look at you. And I know that might be like a metaphorical phrase or whatever, all right? The storm is looking at me, or the storms are brewing or whatever. But how he says that I felt this evil looking at me. And we know this storm is not just associated with the Mind Flayer, people. We know this storm is also another season 4 connection, people. And actually, I'm going to correct myself. I always forget to mention this, that we actually see this in season 3 as well. Very important, okay? So keep that in mind. But this storm is also associated with what we see, this layer, all right? This main source that 11 ends up figuring out in season 3, okay, involving with Billy, where we see Billy's kind of layer, all right, with that Brimborn Works or whatever, the Iron Works place, the tire place or whatever it is. Oh, what am I talking about? It's Steelworks, that Brimborn Steelworks, where it kind of looks like it says I'm born on the sign because they kind of hint out that little or shadow out those two words. All right, I've never mentioned that, but take a look at that. It's interesting. But anyways, in season 3, we figure out that storm's associated with the source, okay? So we don't really know it's associated with the Mind Flayer, all right? But maybe it is, okay? Because in season 4, we know this as Vecna's layer, obviously. But we never really know this as the Mind Flayer layer, which I'm going to get to in later theories, trust me. And if you have not seen the Vecna Henry #1 theory, go check that one out. It's killing it. I love it. But as Will says this, all right, this is where I want you to pay attention to Owens, because this is where I think he goes off the script and he has to very much improvise here. Because when Will says, I felt an evil looking at me, all of a sudden Owens looks confused and he goes, in evil? Because then look at how Owens just acts, all right? He kind of thinks for a second, all right, for the first time in this scenario, all right? He thinks about his question. Because all of a sudden he asks people, all right, and he goes, well, what did this evil want? And that, to me, does not sound like a question. That would have been on the list, all right? And that sounds improvised, all right? He really thought about it for a sec. Because with how Will answers, people pay very close attention to Owens, because all of a sudden Will says, and he goes, it wanted to kill. And then Owens snaps back real quickly again. He doesn't think about it, and he goes, to kill you? And if you really think about it, with how he answers so quickly, and he kind of gives a little nod, all right? That's the answer he was expecting, all right? That's why he's asking these questions. He's acting like he's expecting or trying to get Will to answer a specific way. Because why? He's trying to figure out what's going on, but the only reason that makes sense is because maybe these people know what is supposed to go on or what is about to be happening. But the thing is, there is something that intervenes in this season, being the Mind Flayer, which I don't think they know about, and they don't know about it yet, okay? So like we've talked about in the other theories, people, is that obviously Will is connecting to something else first before the Mind Flayer. This is obvious that he's going to appointments, they're checking him out, and they're tracking and reviewing all of this to expect this. But that's the thing, how this season goes, people. That's the intervening thing, the monster that comes in the way of all of this. That's what messes up this scenario of what is supposed to happen. Because how this little conversation ends here, all right, is the big tell, in my opinion, that Owens and these people probably watching were not expecting this, all right? They really probably were expecting Will to just say yes, like, oh, this thing wants to kill me or whatever this evil is. But all of a sudden, Will says, no, not me, everyone else, all right? And again, pay close attention to how Owen's face looks, all right? This was not an expected answer, and this is not what they really thought was about to be said, people. So let me know your thoughts so far. It's getting very interesting, but let's continue, all right? Wait. Before we continue, yes, you might be extremely confused because this is not how I normally end a video, but I thought of something because you know, if you've seen all of these theories, fam, you guys already know that these are extremely long. So I thought of something to get you guys a little bit more content throughout the week. So this is just the first half of this conversation. Get ready for the next half of this conversation tomorrow, fam. Okay, so yes, I'm going to try and split these theories up conversation by conversation, which will continue the entire theory as a whole. But instead of just getting you like one video every week, okay, which annoys the absolute shit out of me. But yes, I thought about this idea, so just let me know your thoughts about this. We're going to continue the conversation tomorrow. It's just going to pick right up with one of these weird intros, okay? Even though this is actually an outro, but whatever, all right? So we're going to continue the conversation tomorrow, so get ready, fam, and I hope you guys like this one, and you guys already know, much love, keep subscribing, liking, following this journey, and you guys already know, we out.